Within each region of the vertebral column, the vertebrae vary in both their size and their shape. However, they all follow a similar structural pattern, which are the structures that we will examine now. Each vertebra possesses a body, which is an oval-shaped cylinder portion that's found on the anterior side of the vertebra. It is the weight-bearing portion, and it progressively becomes larger as one moves down the regions of the vertebral column. The vertebral arch forms the posterior portion of the vertebra. From the arch emerges the spinous process and the right and left transverse processes, both of which we'll examine in a moment. The arch is fundamentally composed of two sets of pieces, the lamina and the pedicle. The lamina of the vertebral arch is found between the spinous process and the transverse process, while the pedicle of the vertebral arch is located between the transverse process and the body of the vertebra. Figure 7.23 highlights the structures of a typical vertebra. From our previous discussion, the body of the vertebra is the large anterior cylinder portion of bone from which the vertebral arch projects from the posterior side of the vertebra. The lamina of the arch connects the spinous process to the transverse process, while the pedicle of the vertebral arch connects the transverse process to the body of the vertebra. The vertebral foramen is the oval-shaped opening between the vertebral arch and the body of the vertebra. It contains and protects the spinal cord. A large projection called the spinous process is found on the posterior most part of the vertebral arch. There are two transverse processes that emerge from the right and the left lateral portions of the vertebral arch. Near the pedicle are a pair of upward projecting structures that are called the superior articular processes, and these possess facets which form joints with the vertebra above it. The vertebra also possesses a pair of downward projecting structures that are called the inferior articular processes. These also have facets on them which form joints with the vertebra that is below it. The basic way in which the joints are formed is that the superior articular processes which project upward will form joints with the inferior articular processes of the vertebra that's located above it. Returning to figure 7.23, we can examine the vertebral foramen, which contains the spinal cord, the spinous process, which forms the posterior projection of the vertebra, and the two transverse processes, which form the right and left lateral projections from the vertebral arch. Near the pedicle are the pair of superior articular processes which project upward, forming joints with the inferior articular processes of the vertebra that's located above it.